Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we re-embarking on a journey through a period of immense change and progress, the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. These eras gave us breathtaking art, revolutionary science, and philosophies that reshaped our understanding of freedom and human rights. But history is complex, and alongside this incredible flourishing of human potential, there existed a darker side. It's a side that is often uncomfortable to examine, but crucial for a complete understanding of how our modern world was forged. So, let us explore this paradox. How could an age of such enlightenment also witness profound human suffering? Let's start with the Renaissance, a period stretching roughly from the 14th to the 17th century. We think of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and the rebirth of classical knowledge. It was a time of incredible creativity and intellectual curiosity. However, this was also an era of intense political and religious turmoil. Europe was not a unified continent, but a patchwork of competing city-states, kingdoms, and principalities. Rulers like the Borgias in Italy or Henry VIII in England consolidated their power through ruthless means. Political intrigue was rampant, and dissent was often met with severe consequences. The pursuit of power frequently overshadowed the era's artistic and intellectual achievements, creating a climate of fear and instability for many. Religious division was another major source of conflict. The Protestant Reformation, initiated by Martin Luther in 1517, fractured the religious unity of Western Christendom. This wasn't just a theological debate, it ignited over a century of devastating religious wars across Europe. The 30 Years' War, for example, involved nearly every major European power and resulted in immense loss of life and widespread destruction, particularly in the German lands. Both Catholics and Protestants were convinced of their own righteousness, and this conviction was used to justify actions that caused incredible suffering. This period teaches us a powerful lesson about how deeply held beliefs, when combined with political power, can lead to devastating conflict. This climate of fear and suspicion also fueled one of the most tragic episodes of this period, the witch hunts. From the late 15th to the early 18th century, a wave of panic swept across Europe and even its American colonies. Tens of thousands of people, mostly women, were accused of witchcraft. These accusations often stemmed from local disputes, social anxieties, or simple misfortune like a failed crop or an unexplained illness. The trials were often a formality, relying on flimsy evidence and confessions extracted under duress. The witch hunts represent a dark chapter where superstition and mass hysteria completely overwhelmed reason and justice, even as the seeds of scientific thought were being sown elsewhere. As we move into the 17th and 18th centuries, we enter the Age of Enlightenment. This was the age of reason, of thinkers like John Locke, Voltaire, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who championed ideas of liberty, individual rights, and the separation of powers. They challenged the authority of absolute monarchs and the church, laying the intellectual groundwork for modern democracies. It seems like a complete departure from the preceding era, a final triumph of light over darkness. Yet, the reality was, once again, much more complicated. One of the greatest contradictions of the Enlightenment was that it coincided with the peak of the transatlantic slave trade. While philosophers in European salons were debating the nature of human freedom, millions of Africans were being forcibly captured, transported across the Atlantic in horrific conditions, and condemned to a life of brutal servitude in the Americas. The economies of many European nations, which funded the very culture of the Enlightenment, were built on the profits of slave labor. This stark hypocrisy is a critical point to understand. The new ideals of liberty and rights were, for a long time, applied very selectively. Many Enlightenment thinkers either ignored the issue or, in some cases, even tried to create pseudoscientific justifications for this brutal system. It is a sobering reminder that even the most progressive ideas can coexist with and be financed by profound injustice. Furthermore, this was the great age of European colonialism. Driven by economic ambition and a sense of cultural superiority, European powers expanded their empires across the globe. This expansion was not a peaceful process. It involved military conquest, the displacement of indigenous peoples, and the exploitation of natural resources. The Enlightenment idea of civilizing the world was often used as a justification for imposing European control and dismantling existing cultures and societies. The consequences of this colonial expansion were far-reaching and are still being felt today in many parts of the world. The belief in their own enlightened superiority allowed Europeans to rationalize actions that caused immense harm to other peoples. Even within Europe, the enlightened ideals of the era didn't always translate into practice. The society was still highly stratified. Absolute monarchs like Louis XIV of France or Peter the Great of Russia held immense power. While some were considered enlightened despots who embraced certain reforms, their rule was ultimately autocratic. The vast majority of the population were peasants who had few rights and lived in poverty, far removed from the intellectual debates of the elite. Justice systems, though undergoing reform, could still be incredibly harsh. Public executions were common spectacles intended to enforce social order through fear. The promise of the Enlightenment was not a reality for everyone. So, how do we make sense of this? How can we reconcile the magnificent art of the Renaissance with its political cruelty, or the brilliant philosophy of the Enlightenment with the brutality of slavery and colonialism? The key is to recognize that history is not a simple story of progress. It's a messy, complex, and often contradictory process. These periods were battlegrounds of ideas, where old ways of thinking clashed with new ones. The ideals of humanism, reason, and liberty were powerful and genuinely revolutionary, but they took a long time to take root, and their application was often limited by the prejudices and economic interests of the time. Studying these darker aspects isn't about diminishing the achievements of the Renaissance and Enlightenment. It's about gaining a more complete and honest picture of the past. It reminds us that progress is not inevitable. It has to be fought for, and the ideals we hold dear must be constantly defended and extended to all people, not just a select few. It shows us that even societies that produce great art and brilliant ideas are capable of profound failings. This is a crucial lesson from history, one that remains incredibly relevant today. As we strive to build a better world, we must remain vigilant against hypocrisy and injustice in our own time. Thank you so much for joining me on this complex historical journey today. I know it's a heavy topic, but understanding the full picture is so important. If you found this video thought-provoking, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into history. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.